I want you to compare these two keys parts. Version A, version B. So these are the same chord progression. The difference is just that I've rearranged how I'm playing the chords on the piano, and then I've added some rhythm. And the idea here is the same as what you might do if you're a guitar player, where you find one chord shape and then create lots of different rhythms with your strumming hand. So in this video, we'll go through 10 steps to get from version A to version B. And if you like the format of this series I'm doing on how to strum the piano, you can join my 30-day challenge, where you'll receive one video like this every day for a month to inspire your daily practice. All right, step one is just to find those basic chord shapes. And we really only have two chords here, E minor and B minor 7. For the E minor, you need E, G, and B. For the B minor 7, you need B, D, and F sharp. And you might recognize B minor 7 is the same as a B minor triad. We've just added an A on top. So the difference between a minor chord and a minor 7 chord is we've added this 7th. For a minor 7 chord, it's going to be a whole step below the root of the chord. Now you can play a decent keys part just with these basic versions of the chords if you add sustain pedal. So without sustain pedal, it sounds pretty dry, and it doesn't really sound like it belongs with this kind of song. But with the sustain pedal, I can connect between the chords while I'm moving my hand. So to connect between chords, I'm going to put my foot down after playing a chord, hold it down while I move my hand, and then my hand and foot move in opposite directions. So hand goes down, foot comes up, then foot can go back down whenever I want, and that repeats the cycle. We call that changing the pedal. So that's step two. And for most pianists who are new to playing chords, just getting good at changing the pedal to connect between chords is going to make a huge difference in how you sound at the instrument. Now, if we want a richer, fuller keys part with some bass in it, we can add the left hand. And I'll start just with root notes on E and B. But I can also add octaves. And that really fills out the sound of the chord. Keep in mind with that octave frame that the octave is always the same distance between your pinky and thumb. But you do want to make sure that you're relaxing a little bit as you move from one octave to the next. And that as soon as you play the octave, you drop the weight into the key, and then you release the tension in your hand. Otherwise, if you're new to playing octaves and you start doing them all over the place in your left hand, you can get a little soreness, which can potentially lead to injury. Now I'd like to introduce our first rhythm pattern here. So this song is actually in 6/8. You don't need to worry so much about the 8 part of that if you're not reading sheet music. But the 6 part is important. We have groups of strong and weak beats organized into groups of 6. And within that, there are actually 2 bigger strong beats. There's kind of a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But those strong beats get split into 3. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So that feeling of grouping into 6 is why we would call this a time signature of 6/8. 6/8 is pretty easy to create a rhythm pattern with if you have a 3-note chord shape. And you might have noticed just now that I left off the bottom note of my 4-note B minor 7 chord. I just played the top 3 notes of the chord, which is a great way to play a 7th chord if you've got the root in the bass. At this point, it just looks like a D major shape in my right hand. So now it looks like my right hand is going between E minor and D major. And with those 3-note chord shapes, it's very easy to create a consistent rhythmic pattern that works out to 6 beats. I could go bottom to top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I could go top to bottom, Or we could do bottom to top and then top to bottom, which is more like what Alicia Keys does. So give that a try, and we're already pretty close to playing the actual Keys part from Fallen. Now, to get to the actual Alicia Keys part for the verses of this song, we need to use a concept called inversions. And if that's new to you, I have a whole video on the topic. All you're doing is changing which octave you're playing some of the chord tones in. Instead of E, G, B, I'm going to play E, G, B for my first inversion E minor chord shape. And then I'll be using two different shapes for the B minor 7. I'm going to stick with this 3-note shape that looks kind of like a D major. And I'm going to start with this inversion, A, D, F sharp. And then I'll go down to this inversion, F sharp, A, D. So same set of notes in these chords. We're changing the inversion by flipping around the order of the notes. And if I do that and I use the same bottom to top, top to bottom rhythm pattern, it sounds like this. That's a pretty great Keys part. I mean, it was good enough for Alicia Keys. So from here, we're going to get into some more difficult concepts that are kind of bonus. They're helpful if you want to create a contrast when you go to the chorus of this song, and you can hear that on the recording. Let's start by playing some 4-note voicings for these triads. So instead of 3 notes in my right hand, I'm going to be finding 4 notes in the right hand. I like playing this shape for E minor. So it looks like an E minor root position chord, but I'm doubling the E up an octave. And this is always a great framework for creating a 4-note voicing for a triad. You just play a basic triad, but then the outer note gets doubled at the octave. So here's our E minor 4-note shape. Gonna do the same thing with this shape for the B minor 7, and that looks like this. So D, F sharp, A, D. And those are some 4-note voicings. And if you're looking for a way to get bigger, meatier chord shapes in your right hand, these 4-note triad voicings are really, really useful. So try practicing them in every inversion. Now, with 4 notes in the right hand, I might need to do something a little different to create this 6/8 arpeggio pattern. We could just go from bottom to top and back down without repeating the top note. So here's... That's a great option. And when you listen to pianists playing in this time signature and creating arpeggio patterns, there are kind of endless variations on it. You could go, or you could go. There starts to be a lot more possibility now that we have 4 notes, and you could play around and create your own variation on how to play an arpeggio pattern in 6/8. Now I'd like to play around with a different approach to playing 6/8. We're just going to play repeated 8th notes in the right hand, playing off of the left hand, and it sounds like this. Sustain pedal is very important to the sound of this pattern, and generally you're going to want to be really light in your right hand so that the sound kind of blossoms while you repeat these notes, mostly due to the sustain of the sustain pedal. For step 9, you can do that same thing, but with the 4-note voicings, and here you'll have to watch out a bit for tension buildup in your hand. Just make sure that you're releasing the tension in your hand as soon as you actually attack the note. You might also be able to see that I'm creating a lot of the sound just by dropping in the weight of my arm, and I'm using some wrist flexibility in order to create the sound of these chords. And for a bonus, step 10, we can go to a different kind of 5 chord. Now, I haven't mentioned numbers up to this point in this video, but I love thinking of chords in terms of numbers. We number the notes of the scale for whatever key we're in. Now here I think we're in E minor, and so the B chord is a 5 chord. But a lot of times songwriters and composers will either use a minor chord for the 5 chord or a major or dominant chord for the 5 chord when we're in a minor key. So you can either play this B minor chord as your 5 chord, or you could play B dominant 7 as your 5 chord. And it's kind of nice to end a phrase with that stronger sounding 5 chord or dominant chord. Dominant is the theory term for a 5 chord. With that stronger dominant chord, it actually sounds a little bit more minor to my ear. So that's kind of a bonus alternate chord you can throw in at the end of the phrase. And my last tip is to really play around with the dynamics. You could try kind of swelling through each measure when you're doing these repeated eighth notes. And that's it for 10 steps to expand upon this classic chord progression. Again, if you enjoy this approach to expanding upon chord progressions, so you can approach the piano in a more improvisatory way when you're playing songs from chord charts, you can join my 30-day challenge, where you'll get a little prompt like this once a day for a month. It'll help you stay accountable with daily practice, which is really what matters if you want to improve at an instrument. Thanks for joining me. I'm Ted. Happy practicing.